The unprecedented resignation of Joseph Ratzinger as Pope this week was compelled by an upcoming action by a European government to issue an arrest warrant against Ratzinger and a public lien against Vatican property and assets by Easter. The ITCCS Central Office in Brussels is compelled by Pope Benedict's sudden abdication to disclose the following details. On Friday, February 1st, 2013, on the basis of evidence supplied by our affiliated Common Law Court of Justice, our office concluded an agreement with representatives of a European nation and its courts to secure an arrest warrant against Joseph Ratzinger, aka Pope Benedict, for crimes against humanity and ordering a criminal conspiracy. This arrest warrant was to be delivered to the Office of the Holy See in Rome on Friday, February 15, 2013. It allowed the nation in question to detain Ratzinger as a suspect in crime if he entered into its sovereign territory. A diplomatic note was issued by the said nation's government to the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, on Monday, February 4, 2013, informing Bertone of the impending arrest warrant and inviting his office to comply. No reply to this note was received from Cardinal Bertone or his office, but 6 days later, Pope Benedict resigned. The agreement between our tribunal and the said nation included a second provision to ensue a commercial lien through that nation's courts against the property and wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, commencing on Easter Sunday, March 31, 2013. This lien was to be accompanied by a public and global Easter reclamation campaign whereby Catholic Church property was to be occupied and claimed by citizens as public assets forfeited under international law and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. It is the decision of our tribunal and the said nation's government to proceed with the arrest of Joseph Ratzinger upon his vacating the office of the Roman Pontiff on a charge of crimes against humanity and criminal conspiracy. It is our further decision to proceed as well with the indictment and arrest of Joseph Ratzinger's successor as Pope on the same charges, and to enforce the commercial lien and Easter reclamation campaign against the Roman Catholic Church as planned. In closing, our tribunal acknowledges that Pope Benedict's complicity in criminal activities of the Vatican Bank, IOR, was compelling his eventual dismissal by the highest officials of the Vatican. But according to our sources, Secretary of State Tarcisio Bertone forced Joseph Ratzinger's resignation immediately, and in direct response to the diplomatic note concerning the arrest warrant that was issued to him by the said nation's government on February 4, 2013. We call upon all citizens and governments to assist our efforts to legally and directly disestablish the Vatican Inc. and arrest its chief officers and clergy who are complicit in crimes against humanity and the ongoing criminal conspiracy to aid and protect child torture and trafficking. Thank you.
It matters little to Daniel Montgomery whether Pope Benedict slowed the defrocking of a Tucson priest who he says sexually abused him when he was 7. All he knows is that he can't forget it.
There's not a day that goes by I don't think about what happened to me. Every day.
Daniel received a substantial sum of money from the Diocese of Tucson after suing over sexual abuse he says took place in the confessional at Our Mother of Sorrows Church in Tucson by Father Michael Teta, a priest his family regarded as a friend.
I could smell his breath right now. And remember him breathing on me.
In 1997, a church tribunal found there to be an almost satanic quality in Father Teta's mode of acting towards young men and boys. But it wasn't until 2004, 14 years after he was first reported, that Teta was publicly laicized, cut adrift by the church.
From Joseph Ratzinger, his signature is here, and it's a letter to this bishop telling him, you make sure you conduct all your investigations in secret.
Lawyer Lynn Cadigan says paperwork recently uncovered shows the previous Bishop of Tucson wrote to Cardinal Ratzinger pleading for speed in ending the case against Teta.
When you weigh the rights of a priest versus the rights of a child to be free from rape, clearly the Holy Father should consider the rights of the child.
But Bishop Gerald Kincanas, who was brought in to heal the diocese after the sex abuse allegations, denies his predecessor wrote out of desperation or that Ratzinger did nothing.
In the case of Michael Teta, Cardinal Ratzinger actually wrote to Bishop Moreno encouraging him to move the case along. And Bishop explained that this was a very complex case. There were many witnesses to interview. We didn't have a lot of canonical expertise in the diocese.
Michael Teta still lives in Tucson, where he's been known to occasionally give interviews denying he did anything wrong.
Can I ask who you are?
No.
Do you live here now?
I'm watching the house.
Oh, and he's gone
Goodbye.
Arizona is not the only place where Pope Benedict is accused of siding with priests rather than those they're accused of abusing. As Archbishop of Munich in the 80s, he's said to have approved housing for a priest accused of child abuse. In the 90s, he's accused of failing to act quickly enough to stop a priest abusing 200 boys at a school for the deaf in Wisconsin. And he's said to have resisted defrocking California priest Stephen Keasley, saying the good of the universal church had to be considered. Advocacy groups, people who speak up for victims of priestly abuse, say the real crime is not that priests abuse children, terrible though that is, but that some bishops in the United States tried to cover it up. They say the church only took the issue seriously and paid victims compensation once the lawyers got involved. Dave Lorenz was abused by a priest in Kentucky and now works with victims of predator priests. He says the church believes ordained priests are a notch above the laity.
I don't think they've ever totally comprehended that this is a crime. The degradation that a child goes through, the shame, the guilt, when a priest tells them, if you tell anybody, you will go to hell.
Dan Montgomery doesn't wish the Pope any ill. He would like the headlines to fade away, even though he knows memories of the abuse he suffered at the hands of his priest are unlikely to. John Terrett, Al Jazeera, Tucson, Arizona.
At a time when his every word is being analyzed, Pope Benedict's message at his appearance in Rome today was full of religious code, but made no direct reference to the child abuse scandal now rocking the Catholic Church. Instead, he prayed for forgiveness.
We humbly beg his forgiveness for our own failings.
But forgiveness was not on the minds of many of the faithful in Ireland, where the Pope's open letter on child abuse in the Irish Church was read before congregations today. The letter speaks of shame and remorse and of sinful and criminal acts, but it does not call for the resignation or punishment of those who committed the abuse.
To us bishops, he says, we must admit that grave errors of judgment were made and failures of leadership occurred, which have seriously undermined our credibility and effectiveness.
Cardinal Brady admits he himself made 2 children sign documents promising to keep the abuse they suffered secret, but he has not so far succumbed to calls for him to resign. And it is resignations that are being demanded by people like Andrew Madden, who was molested repeatedly by a priest as a child.
Most importantly, the Pope has not acknowledged in any way the role of the Catholic Church in covering up the sexual abuse of children.
The church abuse scandal has now spread from Ireland right across Europe, including the Pope's home country of Germany, while he was a bishop there. New allegations from South America have added to the earlier scandals that so unsettled the church in the U.S. and Canada. And for many, the remorse being expressed in Rome is not enough. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
I'm Mike Finnegan, one of the attorneys with Jeff Anderson Associates. Within the last week, Pope Francis offered an apology to victims of child sex abuse. That rings hollow and doesn't do anything to protect kids. Back in 2005, Barbara Blaine, the courageous survivor who started the Survivors Network of those abused by priests, went to the Vatican, and she asked them for action, asked them to do something more than just apologize. And unfortunately, we're here now 13 years later, and again we have Pope Francis issuing an apology. Apologies don't protect kids, and apologies, all that they do is keep the pedophiles in place instead of protecting kids. And what they need to do is take action. And so they should immediately release all the names of pedophile priests that Pope Francis knows about, and they should discipline all the bishops who have covered up for these crimes for years.
In his last day in the city of Turin, Pope Francis made history by visiting a Waldensian church. It's the first time a pope visits an evangelical church of that particular denomination. In doing so, he received a warm welcome.
In questo percorso di persone e di chiese, noi incontriamo fratelli e sorelle che condividono con noi il cammino e oggi con gioia incontriamo anche lei, Papa Francesco, come un nuovo fratello nel nostro percorso.
The Pope got to know this church well in Argentina. With about 30,000 faithful worldwide, it's quite small, with most of its presence in Italy and France, where it began back in the 12th century. In his speech, the Pope addressed past persecution. He asked for forgiveness on behalf of the Catholic Church.
Vi chiedo perdono per gli atteggiamenti e i comportamenti non cristiani, persino non umani che nella storia abbiamo avuto contro di voi. In nome del Signore Gesù Cristo, perdonateci.
Unity, he explained, is something they should strive for. But reaching unity, though, does not mean uniformity.
L'unità che è frutto dello Spirito Santo non significa uniformità. I fratelli, infatti, sono accomunati da una stessa origine, ma non sono identici tra di loro.
Before heading out, the Pope called on them to work together to help those in need. As he usually does in massive and private meetings, the Pope asked them to pray for him.
La parola di Gesù è forte oggi, Guai per
The word of Jesus is strong today. Woe to the world for its scandals. Jesus is a realist, and it is inevitable that scandals happen. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh.
Io vorrei, prima di iniziare la catechesi,
Before we begin the catechesis, I want, in the name of the Church, to ask forgiveness for the scandals which recently have hit Rome and the Vatican. I ask for forgiveness.
Vi chiedo perdono.
Words, 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 thoughts and prayers does not make a child safer. He could, with the stroke of a pen, demand that every diocese in the world release the records, no more secret files. That's one sentence, 2 minutes worth of action. He could, with another 2 minutes and one sentence, say, every accusation of child sex abuse has to be reported to civil society. So both of those actions he could take. Instead of quoting scripture, he could take action. He has not.
Worthless. What are prayers?
For many of the parishioners at St. Mary's Basilica's noon Mass, the letter is welcome news.
I'm glad the Pope is speaking out and saying that they're not going to cover up anymore.
The letter references the grand jury report in Pennsylvania that found 301 priests in the state had sexually abused minors over the past 70 years.
It's an expression of sorrow. It's an expression of failure. It's a recognition that there are issues that we haven't sufficiently addressed in the culture.
Halifax lawyer John McKiggin says he has represented more than 1,000 survivors of childhood sex abuse, the vast majority involving the Catholic Church. He says the letter is the strongest statement yet from the Vatican, but that it lacks what the Church is actually going to do.
They're going to laicize these priests. There's nothing in there. The letter is silent about what the Vatican is going to do about bishops who knew about this abuse, protected abusers, and moved them around from parish to parish like checkers on a checkerboard.
McKiggin says a wider effort to reach out to survivors is one concrete step that needs to be taken. He recently filed a proposed class action lawsuit against the diocese over which Anthony Mancini presides.
I've been here just about 11 years. And this has been one of the primary issues that I've dealt with and continue to deal with during the whole ministry that I've exercised here.
Mancini agrees the Pope's letter today lacks specifics when it comes to creating change, but he insists there is change happening on a national level. The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops plans to launch new guidelines in the fall to protect minors.
If someone has done something that's not correct, call the police. Let them know, and we'll deal with it.
As part of an effort to rebuild battered faith in an ancient institution, the Pope is calling on all Catholics to be a part of the solution, inviting them to pray and fast. Parishioners at St. Mary's say they will. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Pope Francis was met by ecstatic crowds in the city of Santa Cruz. The pontiff joined Bolivian President Evo Morales at a summit of social movements. In a speech, the pontiff apologized for the past actions of the Catholic Church. I humbly ask for forgiveness, not only for the offenses of the Church herself, but also for crimes committed against the native peoples during the so-called conquest of America. The summit brings together groups of people marginalized in society. Pope Francis used strong words to highlight the plight of Christians in the Middle East who are persecuted and killed for their faith. In this Third World War, waged piecemeal, which we are now experiencing, a form of genocide is taking place, and it must end. Earlier, hundreds of thousands of people packed into Santa Cruz's Christ the Redeemer Square to see the Pope. The government declared a national holiday so people could attend the open-air Mass. Overnight, thousands of people slept outside to be...
And in other news, Pope Francis has offered his deepest apologies to the people who suffered sexual abuse at the hands of Catholic priests. However, many say his apology comes too late and doesn't go far enough. Shin Se-min has more.
The Pope also publicly requested forgiveness for cases of sexual abuse of minors committed by priests.
Y aquí no puedo dejar de manifestar el dolor y la vergüenza que siento ante el daño irreparable causado a niños por parte de ministros de la Iglesia. Me quiero unir a mis hermanos en el episcopado, ya que es justo pedir perdón y apoyar con todas las fuerzas a las víctimas.
In Chile, the several cases of abuse and how the church managed the situation caused not only shock, but also a deep pain. That's why Pope Francis's words were received with a loud applause. At the end of the event, before leaving to celebrate Mass at O'Higgins Park, the Pope met with Michelle Bachelet for several minutes.
Pope Francis made his first public plea for forgiveness on Friday for the evil committed by priests who molested children, using some of his strongest words yet on the Roman Catholic Church's sexual abuse crisis. He told members of the International Catholic Child Bureau,
I feel compelled to personally take on all the evil which some priests, quite a few in number, obviously not compared to the number of all the priests, to personally ask for forgiveness for the damage they have done for having sexually abused children. The Church is aware of this damage. It is a personal, moral damage made by them. But they are men of the Church. We are not going to take a step backwards as far as the treatment of these problems goes, nor as far as the sanctions that must be imposed. On the contrary, I think we must be very strong. You don't joke around with children.
On Sunday, Pope Francis begged forgiveness for the multitude of abuses suffered by victims in Ireland at the hands of the Catholic Church over
Daño que han hecho por los abusos sexuales de los niños. La Iglesia es consciente de este daño, que es un daño personal, moral de ellos, pero hombres de Iglesia. Y no vamos a dar un paso atrás en lo que se refiere al tratamiento de estos problemas y a las sanciones que se deben poner. Al contrario, creo que debemos ser muy fuertes. Con los chicos no se juega.
Pope Francis is seeking forgiveness for recent scandals that have rocked the Vatican and Rome.
Les digo con pesar, se han cometido muchos y graves pecados contra los pueblos originarios de América en nombre.
Around the world, the Holy See later explained the content of the meeting. The Pope expressed his grief over the genocide committed against the Tutsis and apologized for the sins and failings of the Church and its members, among whom priests and religious men and women who succumbed to hatred and violence, betraying their own evangelical.
Ser muy fuertes. Con los chicos no se juega.